joining us tonight.
Yeah. It's my pleasure.
So everybody knows you from around the world. I'm going to just give you a brief introduction. You started writing very early on in your young adult life in the 1980s, late 1970s in the Bronx in the Longwood section. Soon after, you joined TATS CRU and started painting on the trains around New York City. And then soon after, you became a professional, and you guys were sort of the first sort of graffiti corporation, I think, in the United States. And by the 90s, you guys started to paint murals and really become at the forefront of artistic professionals in New York City. And so today, we thank you for joining us, and we're going to talk about this illustrious career that you've had as a painter, as a muralist, and as an all-around artist. And so I thank you again for joining us, and we're very happy and excited to have you. And so we're going to just kind of take a trip down memory lane with you, Nicer, and show a little bit of sort of what you kind of grew up, or how did you grow up, and your neighborhood, Longwood, was known for filming films, and lots of films. Paul Newman's Fort Apache the Bronx is one of them. So what was it like for you to grow up in this section of the Bronx?
Well, growing up there for me, it was it's kind of it's strange because it's like two different worlds. Like for us, it was normal everyday living. We played in abandoned buildings, we played in abandoned lots. For us, it was just part of our background. Yeah, it looked like that. And it wasn't until I got older and started traveling that I started realizing, wow, where I'm from is kind of like messed up. But for us, it was always community love. Everybody took care of each other's parents, and the parents took care of the kids in the neighborhood. So it wasn't like it was all out, craziness, but it was just the surroundings looked like that. It was abandoned. And but they did film a lot of movies in my neighborhood. Wolfen was one of them. If you guys know Wolfen, Fort Apache, even Beach Street was filmed in our neighborhood, like all up and down from Southern Boulevard all the way to Prospect Avenue, which is the length of Longwood. So, but we had, we had that kind of like that stigma that people attached to that neighborhood or surrounding neighborhoods, that, it was all bad and bad people. But in reality, we were just, surviving and living, amongst what we had. So.
And so your neighborhood, being in the Bronx and coming up as a young boy there, your neighborhood had writings on the wall. It already had graffiti on the walls. There's for many years.
Yeah,
But you were introduced to it.
It's funny. That's a funny story.
You were introduced to it by one of your neighbors.
Yeah. Actually, Wiggles. He used to write Rek, R-E-K, and I remember I used to be at my grandmother's house, and he lived above us, and because he used the hallway, him and his crew would use the hallway to practice routines and stuff like that. But when they weren't dancing, he actually started. He went to School of Art and Design with Doze and a bunch of other guys from that era. So, but the first time I ever got to see somebody do a graffiti piece was him. He was painting right outside my grandmother's window, was an abandoned building, and they had the doorway boarded, like not boarded up, it was all bricked up. And he did a piece on it. And I saw him started from a sketch to a fill-in and the final outline, because back then we didn't have thin caps or nothing. Like everything was stock caps. So, but I think that was the very first time I saw someone do their name in graffiti, and I was kind of blown away. I wanted to know how to do that. So he was a little older than me, so I used to ask him like, "Yo, can you show me that?" He was like, "Yeah." But it's funny because we've been friends ever since, and I know his entire family. But that was kind of like the first time I saw somebody do an actual piece right in front of my eyes. I remember sitting in the windowsill, just in shock. So
And so from that moment where you saw it, when did you sort of really become fascinated by it? Prior to us talking, you had mentioned traveling and having to travel
yeah,
in the city. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
yeah. So I grew up in the Bronx, in that neighborhood actually my entire life. I lived there till like many years. And what ended up happening was my mother decided the neighbor was getting bad, so she decided to take us to Queens, where it'll be safer for us. So I would go to, I was in junior high school at the time, so I would go to school from Monday to Friday, and then every Friday night we would travel on the train from Queens into Manhattan into the Bronx. So I was always fascinated with comic books as a kid, and I was always drawing. I was always tracing comics, and even like tracing the stuff that was in the back of the TV guides. Like, it would have the pirate and the little turtle, Tippy, whatever it was. And so I was always intrigued by comic books. But I remember getting on the train with my mother doing those travels and seeing what a train painted, how it reminded me of a comic book cover. Because if you look at a comic book cover, you have the name of the superhero, and it's usually like in a block style or funky lettering.
Right. Here we go. I pulled some references up
Right,
to
yeah.
sort of show that.
So if you look at like what a train breakdown is, it's usually like the lettering would be alongside from door to door, like panel to panel. And then on either side of it, on one side of it, it would have a character. So the character,
Sure.
to me, like a superhero. So it was like, who the hell's painting comic book covers on these trains? And it was,
Right. Here's an example of that.
but when I got back to my block, yeah, like Beetle Bailey and stuff like that, Hogar. So what ended up happening was, I remember being young and getting back to my neighborhood and asking around, like, who's doing these things? Like, who does that? Like, how do you learn to do that? And they were like, oh, the thug hanging out in the building that smokes weed all day long, he's the one taking tags. And those tags, that's graffiti. And then I didn't know back then that, it was illegal. To me, I was still kind of so in awe and like interested in like, how do you do this? Who does this? Like, where do you go to do this? And once you start, remember, this was before the internet, before magazines, so you had to actually go out and look for it and ask around and do your own research if you really want to find out about something. So, and that's how I kind of like started taking tags, and I didn't know what I was getting into, but it was something that I was drawn to from the moment I took my first tag to, and it was a funny story because when I lived in Queens, I only lived there for 1 year. Baby 168, which is like a big inspiration. I used to hang out with his little brother, and his little brother used to sneak when he wasn't around. We used to sneak into his bedroom, and I was trying to find out about graffiti. So I would be going through his black books, like, oh wow, oh, and he had a collection of like Penthouse books. So his brother would be flipping through the Penthouse books and looking at naked ladies, and I'm over there going through black books, like, oh, this is amazing. Like, so, it was funny because he actually is another inspiration of mine. Like, all the things that he did, and a lot of people don't give him a lot of credit for what he's done, but he definitely was up there.
And like you, I believe he was originally a Bronx writer that also moved to Queens.
Yeah. That's how me and his brother kind of connected. And it's a funny story because we moved to Queens so we could have a safe life. And I think 7 months after us living there, they broke into our apartment and they stole the rent and they stole a bunch of other things. And my mother said, we're going back to the Bronx where it's safe. And that's.
And so speaking of black books, I just pulled up a drawing here of a Wiggles, black book page to give people an idea of, when you mention black book, for those that don't know, it's a book that writers use to sketch, to practice, to do designs, and they were traded and shared. And like you said, you got to be able to see one of these when
Yeah,
you're a kid. It leaves quite an impression, sort of like when you first would see something like this for the first time.
yeah. And it's funny because when I got a little older and I started racking, and remember I was always into comic books, but I had the craziest collection of heavy metals, ElfQuest, wow, so many. But it was a time where, because
And
these were
those became,
these
no,
were our
go ahead, please.
yeah, these were our inspirations. Like, you got inspired, like, to get an idea, you would flip through these magazines and these comics, and you saw the colors, and it helped you plan out what you were gonna paint the next time you go out and paint a train or a wall. So it was like, for us, those things, they kind of like gave you ideas and inspirations. So
And back then, Heavy Metal magazine, ElfQuest, I mean, Heavy Metal in particular, employed some of the best illustrators in the world.
yeah, and there was another magazine.
Sorayama, Frank Frazetta.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there was Epic magazine, another one. The horror magazines always had dope art. Yeah, the Bernie Wright stuff, that was a lot in there.
So early inspiration from a really great source. And then from there, soon after, I imagine you start to paint trains. What
Yeah.
what was like that? What was that like, going from just a neighborhood to actually going into a train yard?
Well, that didn't happen till I got to high school for me. What ended up happening was, um, I went to James Monroe High School, and I was a freshman, and it was a required art class called Major Art. So I remember going into the class and seeing two guys in the back sharing a table, and I walked by them to sharpen my pencil, and I look, and they was doing outlines, and I was like, we called each other writers. It's like we didn't even call each other graffiti writers. So I was like, yo, you write? And they were like, yeah, what you write? At the time, I think I was writing nice. And so I told them I wrote nice. And then, remember, I was a freshman, and it turned out to be bio and BG. So the crazy thing is, after class, I started following them around. So I became like the young kid following around like two older cats, because BG at the time was a senior, and he was always like in the art class. He was always involved in doing paintings, and because our art teacher would give us these boards and stuff to paint, but he was nice. So, and Bob usually like always gravitated toward the lettering. So when I first met them, I followed them around, and then it's been 40 years later. They still can't get rid of me. I'm still going to be around.
And so now you start painting with these guys, and
Right.
and you start painting trains with them. And this particular piece that I found in a very good book on trains by Cavs, also from the Bronx, features this nicer hands piece.
Yeah,
Very
wow.
different from what anybody else is doing out there at the time.
At the time, I always try to do something different because I was always into character. So I looked at a piece as though, I mean, not anybody could do lettering. Like, I'm not trying to, deframe or minimize lettering style, because it's very influential. It's part of the culture. But what I tried to do here was, instead of arrows, I used hands. And this was something I just made up while I was there that day in the tunnel. I think that was painted in Utica, because we used to always get together as a crew and go to different tunnels and yards and stuff. Mostly tunnels at that time. But at that time, we were painting in Utica in Brooklyn, and we all divided. And next to it is a nick. So I painted the nick, and I painted the hand. So I did the whole car by myself, and it was dark that day. I remember that. So I did a nick piece, like if it was a nice. I figured it's almost close to it. So I did a nick, and then I did the hands. But instead of on the fly, I just decided on doing. And Wow, that was old.
This is 1985, so it's a very long time ago.
Yeah,
But you know, it's interesting when you look at the hands piece. It's a very different style than the Nick piece. These bars that you have sort of intersecting the piece, the
yeah.
way you use the hands, like you said for the arrow,
Right.
very
Yeah,
different from not only the other one, but from just what people were normally doing at the time.
yeah. I mean, but our crew was always like that. We always did. You know, my crew consists of guys that are at the time was like we were young and we were fresh and we were like the newest crew out at the beginning. So we had a lot of problems getting respect at the beginning because there's only two ways you get respect in New York City. You have to be real nice with the graft, and then you got to be nice with the hands. So our crew was kind of known for doing a lot of both. So, but yeah, I mean, Shame 125 always came out with some, real dope characters and lettering styles. You had Raz with the Z. I mean, I seen this dude one day. He did a train piece, sprayed colors on his hands, and that was his designs. And it was crazy because at the time, like, who does that? Volcan one time took foam lettering and glued them onto a train, it was, we have the stuff that Mac was doing, Bai was doing, BG was doing. It was like we always try to push the limit because whenever we painted with each other, it was always kind of like we wanted to outdo each other. So it was always that competitive, like feeling that you always want to make your stuff look hotter than his. So even though we were a team, but it was always that. It was like sports. To us, it was like sports. And I don't see.
And the trains were beautiful then. The trains that you were producing were beautiful. You guys were painting at a time too when they were cleaning the trains very heavily, so you lost a lot of art to the buff.
Yeah, a lot of guys stopped painting at the time where we were really at our height just because they figured if they're gonna keep painting them white, why waste the paint? So for us, we didn't see it that way. We looked at it as it was like a clean sheet of paper. We didn't get for us. Remember, graffiti writing, it's not gonna last forever. So you're doing it for the photo anyway. So you're doing it to get whatever props you could get while it's running until you do your next. So, it's like it was like a race for us. I remember Bob one time when they first painted a white train, we decided on painting the windows white. So it looked like we painted the whole train white. And then they did their pieces. We did some characters. But it was like, and then we folded the edges. We made it look like it was paper folding. But yeah, I mean, these are things that at the time, like, we were just doing it just to rock.
Sure. And you fit into a great tradition. You guys really, brought this level of professionalism and competition, which made you guys fit right into the movement, and you made a very big impact. And then the trains started to die off, and you guys started to move toward the walls.
Yeah, well, that happened. That transition. What ended up happening with us was at the point we stopped painting trains, we were already in our early 20s, like late teens, early 20s. So we were already young adults. Reality hits. You have to get a job. You gotta work. So we would get together on the weekends and paint walls within our neighborhood. So I found a few walls in my neighborhood on Intervale and there used to be a supermarket there. It was a Fedco. This is years ago. And but I got permission to paint that wall. And then so I would call the guys up and we would get together to paint the wall. Like if it was old friends getting together to go fishing. So this is our version of fishing. To see if we still got it and just to get out the house and, and do what we love to do. So that transition was weird for us because people would walk up to, remember, we painted in the dark, we painted in tunnels, we painted in yards. No one saw our faces. Whatever you saw riding on the train, you didn't know. I could be on the train that I painted alongside the guy that went over me, and I wouldn't even know he was there because there were no faces to the thing. There was no, there was no internet. So what ended up happening was once we started painting in the street, people would approach us, and we got weirded out by that because remember it was still looked at as illegal, and they'll be like, "Oh, you painted that other one over there?" You'd be like, "Nope, nope, nope, nope." But you know, it was like it was weird to like finally show your face and let everybody or your neighbors know what you do, and but that's kind of like our introduction to business because now we were being approached by local store owners, mom and pop store owners, hardware stores, you know, businesses like that in the neighborhood. They would want us to paint signs for them. So, you know, we don't do this for money. So we were like, yeah, let's do it. And the leftover paint, we got to do another wall maybe next week or the week after. And one job turned into two jobs, turned into three jobs. Then it got to be something where we were like, wait a minute, there's something going on here because these store owners realized that, you know, they would hire a sign painter to do a sign for them and somebody bombing would do a throw up on it. But then if we went
Sure.
and we painted a sign on it and we signed it, they knew another writer did it, so they wouldn't go over it. So it was kind of like that at the beginning. And then what ended up happening was we picked up the ball, rolling and dribbling with it.
But while you were doing that, you guys still continued to do walls around, you know, you guys were doing, I guess, started painting the Hall of Fame, started painting other locations. You guys had a sort of a schoolyard in the Bronx that you guys would create these paintings.
Yeah, how we started painting the Hall of Fame was after SR Stingray and Part and Dez kind of, it wasn't abandoned, they just stopped using the yard. And it had famous pieces in there. I mean, the Futura piece, there was so many in there. We used to go there from the Bronx just to take photos. I remember that was one of my early adventures going to Manhattan. But it was abandoned for a long time, and Volcan lived across the street. So Volcan went in and started repainting a lot of the walls on his own. Then he kind of invited us to go and do, you know, some pieces down there, and we kind of rebirthed it. And then people started seeing like, oh wow, there's new stuff in here. And then we painted it ever since.
And so many good productions. I mean, this one here shows that at some point you guys were just, like you said before, just battling each other.
Yeah, because if you look at
against each other.
Yeah, if you look at graffiti, it's always been a competitive art form. You know, we always try to do something new, something fresh. But the Hall of Fame to us has a lot of history and it has a lot of meaning. Like just to be a writer in New York City, the Graffiti Hall of Fame is like, you know, a place where, like, I think Dez wrote it on there once, you know, Strictly Kings and Better. So for us, that title really meant something serious. So that's why every year that we do it, Bio always redoes the saying, Strictly Kings and Better.
And you guys are known for concepts. So you're not just coming to do pieces, you're coming to do these concepts. Like this concept right here looks like you're dealing with indigenous people from around the world.
Right, yeah. So I did that in one of the Hall of Fames there. So it was like, for myself, I've always been a character person. I'm always somebody who loves to be creative with cartoons or whether it be, you know, a person or something like, you know, so I treat lettering or what I'm going to paint always with the same feel. Like I want to give it a saying. I want it to say something instead of just, so, you know, I treat everything that I paint kind of in the same way. That was a Halloween wall we did. Yeah, so my thing, so we all picked a monster, and mine, I did the mummy. So I found an old image of the old Boris Karloff mummy. It was black and white, so I kind of made it in monotone colors.
And so when you're doing these concepts, are these concepts, you know, are, you know, well planned out, or when you're doing these letters, are you sketching these? Are you freestyling them, or how do you approach this?
It depends on the day, because there's times we get to a wall, and see, we got to a point where we painted so much throughout the years. Um, we're already using the spray paint like someone would use a pencil on a piece of paper. Like you'll do a sketch. So I'll sketch just like a quick idea, and people be like, "What a mess!" But I see it. I see where I'm going with it. So sometimes we plan it out, but the majority of the times we've always prided ourselves on taking something verbal and making it visual. So I would say about 8 times out of 10, it's made up on the spot. I mean, we've gotten jobs where where we've drawn it out on a napkin and we've given it to the client. We're like, here, we're done. And the client goes, all right, let me show my boss. And they left, and we left that meeting. I remember that day, I was like, oh, we're never gonna get that job. Because everybody else that pitched for the job had these crazy renderings. And when we got there, we didn't have nothing. So we were like, well, let me show you what we were thinking. And funny to say, about 2 weeks later, we got a phone call that we got the job based off of a tissue, like a napkin. The guy left. But it's
Right.
things.
You just had the concepts.
Yeah, on the fly, sometimes it's better than overthinking it. Oh, this was in Morocco.
So, right. So I was about to say, this definitely doesn't look like the United States.
No, that was in a city called Azemmour. It's in Morocco. And we were there, and then I remember they was taking us to a marketplace where I saw guys making rugs out of these threads, and they had these machines, but they were old school machines. Like, I don't know if you can see it there. It's like strings. It looks like a harp. Yeah, so I saw that, and then when we got to the wall, I was like, what the hell am I going to paint? And then I was like, oh, I'm going to paint one of those guys making the rugs. And, that's another example. It's like, sometimes you're inspired by things that you see around you, and that gives you the motivation to do something. And it's weird because I could be inspired by anything. I walk through the supermarket and see a cereal box and go, oh, look at the lettering. And my wife is like, are you crazy? Like, let's go. I'm like, but look at the letters. Like, oh, look at the character. Because it's things around you that inspire you. And sometimes it's something, oh, yeah, it's my captain. I did that in Rikers Island. That was painted on the handball court in Rikers Island. There was a bunch of guys that painted that day. That was put together by Trike, and oh man, that was a good time. That was a good memory.
And so this could very well be, lettering used for packaging, done in your own style, right? This could be on a cereal box. This could be on,
I didn't eat that cereal, but I will.
Right? You Captain Nicer.
Yeah, because it's again,
and then
you get it from everywhere. Like, it's at the moment you got to figure out, what am I going to do in this space? And then you take it from there.
And this is up high, sitting above someone else's piece.
Yeah, I had to do that on a list.
And so here you see, it looks like maybe Doc or somebody, I don't know who's under it, but when you look at this, you look at, you're drawing inspiration from pop culture, comic books, product lettering, right? All this stuff. But your characters are no longer those 2D characters. This is rendered in 3D. Your shadowing game, your highlights. It's something else. It's developed a long way from those old 70s trains that we were talking about before.
Yeah, I mean, because when we first started looking at the development, if you look at graffiti overall, just a quick breakdown. Started with a tag. Somebody took a tag, and it kind of like, someone saw that and said, oh, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do an outline around it. Somebody else saw those 2 steps and said, oh, I'm going to do an outline around my tag, but I'm going to put dots in. So everybody that's contributed to this art form has added to it and brought it one step further. When I started looking at graffiti and looking at stuff that was going on the subway trains at the time, it was really 2D. A character was beige, a black outline, and a color shirt. So once things started to like evolve more, and we had more caps, because back then we only had stock cap. Once things started to evolve a little bit more, then you were able to experiment with more ideas and pushing the envelope just slightly further.
Right, and you also have such a wider color palette.
Yes,
Right,
yes.
you're talking about the beiges before, but I mean, look at this. This
Yeah.
is
What I did was there's two peppermint sticks. I think that's a Twizzler, candy apple, a Reese's cup that makes my E with the two little. So that was all based on candies. Like you see, remember the paper rolls with the dots on them? So
oh
I
yes.
removed some of the dots to make my R, and then I had a little fat kid eating cake. So it was like, again, this was just a theme I played around with on the spot, and it was something that I try to have fun with things, because if you don't laugh, then I think Charlie Chaplin said a day without a laugh is a day wasted. So if you know me, you know me. A lot of people out there that know me, you know I'm a charlatan. I'm a joker. I like to laugh. I like to, if you're not enjoying yourself, then you're wasting your time. So again, like when I do these things, I like to play around with them. That's in It's in Morocco also. That actually is in either that was Casablanca or that was Marrakesh.
And
Okay.
like again, like you said, looks like you're enjoying yourself. You're bringing something fun to life.
Yeah, if you notice, there's a lot of times that I portray kids, whether it's a little girl or a little boy in my paintings, because we all still have an inner child in us. So sometimes I still think I'm 15 or 16 until I get to the mirror and I go, oh, wow, who's that old guy? But the thing is, you have to accept that if you look at children, things don't bother them. They're they'll knock things off their shoulder just because they live in a innocent world, like in their mind. So I like to portray a lot of children sometimes doing bad things, because some kids are bad. But I think children is something that can relate across the board to everyone, because it's really who we are inside. We're still kids inside.
And how are people reacting to this work, as you travel around the world, let's say here in Casablanca, how are these images received by both adults and kids?
We've been to places where we painted in China, we painted Poland, France, and it's funny because even though you're out of your environment where you grew up in, everywhere around the world, there's a block like your block. Like there's always the hood dudes there. There's always the ghetto side of everywhere. And I've been places where they go, no, don't stay in the hotel. Don't go over there. And I'm like, let's go over there. Come on, let's go check that out. So because you're able to interact with people, there's no fear, there's no front. So being that we're in other places that we don't belong or we're invited to, it's well received because the people that are bringing the message are real. You know what I mean? Like if I went there with
Yes.
a suit on and I was like, no, and gated everything off, and no, I didn't want to talk to nobody, and you're in someone else's city or country, you're like, it's not the way you act. That's how I would. You won't get out of my block like that. So you had to learn to talk to people.
Right, survival skills, those survival skills that became so important to have in New York City when you were growing up. And so everybody, we're talking to Nicer from TATS CRU. from the Bronx, New York, and going over some of his career and some of the amazing work that he's painted around the world. So thank you for joining us tonight. Again, this is Nicer. I'm Alan Kett with the Museum of Graffiti, and here we are. Here's an incredibly exquisite piece. Can you tell us a little bit about this one?
Yeah, this was we were trying to not make fun of, but highlight different religions. And it was how, if you look, there's a priest playing a piano, and there's money bags everywhere around the piano. And then you have like a Tibetan monk to the left, and then all the way in the left, I think is like a Muslim praying. We have a guy reading a scroll, like a Jewish guy reading a scroll. So it's like what we try to do was we try to touch on certain religions. And I think somewhere all the way to the right is an old lady with a bag or something like that, or with money in her hand, and she's throwing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea was how certain religions are more interested in the money than actually giving faith or helping people. So that's why we did the windows, and instead of the window stains, we did our pieces. There's a How, a Nazim, a Bio, me, and Demote.
Yep. And your piece is going.
Yeah,
like,
so
yours is going down sideways.
Right.
The reds.
Right.
And so where was this?
So this is on the outside of our office. We had a wall there that was kind of long and ugly. So we used to go out there like in between projects. So Howard Nazem was with us for many years. And what ended up happening was in between projects, me, Bio, Howard Nazem would decide like, oh, let's go out to the wall and paint. So, just to kill some time in between projects. So we did a lot of productions here, and that was one of them. But it's good times, man.
So it's like you guys get to paint for work, but you still find enough time to paint for fun.
Yeah. So this is a heaven and hell piece I did with Demote on our rooftop. So what we did here was Demote's lettering represented angelic coloring, like it was the heaven side of it, but behind them was the hell. And then I did the same. I did red lettering, like if it was like devilish, and then I did clouds, like if it was in heaven. So there's a character I painted in the middle, and he's split. He has a pitchfork on one side, and he has angel wings on the other. So again, this is one of those things where just a quick discussion, like, oh, what'd be dope? And we just start sketching, and then we take it from. For us, it's like a basketball.
I love it. You guys.
For us, it's like a basketball.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. We're like basketball players. Even though they get paid, the professional players get paid to play. Don't tell me on their time off, they're not in their backyard or somewhere shooting the ball or having a one-on-one with somebody or something. You know what I mean? It's like once you do this, you got to continue doing it. It's just part of your DNA already. This is a wall on the roof also I did with Bio. And we did like paint, kind of like smushing out. And yeah, I mean, sometimes, again, this is another wall we did. It's uncommissioned. Some people ask, like, how much does something like this cost? And we would give them a price, and they would freak out. They were like, but you're doing it for free. I'm like, I got leftover paint. So for us, it was like, why not?
Well, listen, I mean, and I think, and you guys doing this, like you said before, you're sharpening your skills, you're practicing, you're also building camaraderie with each other, right? You're connecting. It's like you said, going out fishing. Yeah.
It's something that we love to do. I think Ski said, what else?
These pieces, none of the pieces that we've shown so far have you duplicated your letter style.
Yeah, no, that's another thing. Remember, there's 3 of us here. And if you know us, we like to snap on each other. That's why when somebody comes in and they can't take the jokes, they leave right away. Because we're notorious for that. Like if you're wearing something, we're like, what's that? Like, what the hell is that? Like, you know, we snap. So
Yeah.
if you're doing the same thing over and over again, you're gonna hear it. And that was one of the best things about being part of a trio is that, like, if I'm not inspired to do something one day and the other guys are in full mode, they'll be like, come on, let's paint, let's do something, like, and it just pushes you to keep moving forward, because if not, every artist, whether you're a writer, whether you're a singer, whether there's moments, creative moments that you get stuck, and you're kind of like, you know, you can't get out of the rut. But this isn't France. This is part of
And so this is pretty unconventional.
yeah, no, I was playing around with some light coming through it. Yeah, no,
So
I mean,
this is in France.
yeah, so that was part of that was indoor, part of an event called it was a hip hop event. I think it was French hip hop festival, something like that. But again, wherever I go, I represent the Bronx. It's funny, I put a Bronx hoodie on the guy. But yeah, I mean, we try. BG was the one that did the radio above, because that was part of his name. But you know, we always try to do something different, something new. Again, you still like, for me, it's still fun to do this because I'm still learning. Like, no matter how many years I've been doing this, I'm still learning. So I can paint alongside a guy that's been doing it. If I've been doing it 40 years, if he's been doing it 45 years, I learned something from him. But I can also paint alongside a guy that's been doing it 5 years, and he'll do something and I'll learn from him. So it's something that's always like, it's like your brain is still a sponge and you want to do more and learn more and try different things. Because believe you me, if I was doing the same piece over and over and over and over and over again, if it's like a cookie cutter, then why do it? It's like, then for that, I'd get a regular job, because that's what it seems like. You're doing the same thing over and over.
And I guess in part of that, pushing yourself to learn new things and to try new things, you know, you started working in the studio and painting indoors on canvas.
Yeah, that came about. What ended up happening was, for years while we were painting commercial work in the street, mural projects, we were always asked, or we've been asked in the past, to be part of gallery exhibits, or, you know, to do some paintings for a show. And we always declined because that wasn't who we were. Like, our niche was, we know how to deal with these companies. We know how to deal with ad agencies. We know how to go out, give them what they want, and make money that way. So it was never an interest to go out and put what we were doing on canvas, because we didn't think that was our lane. But about, I say 8 years ago, like that, might be wrong, but around that time, we, little by little, we saw the twins painting on canvases. We you know, we saw each other painting one canvas here, without giving it like a plan. And then it's funny, because the same way we all have our own style, like Bio do lettering, BG will do like portraits and backgrounds and stuff like that. And, you know, I'll do everything else. But what ended up happening was, we all have our own style and we meshed together. And when we started painting canvases, we realized everybody had their own look and their own style to what they were painting. So, you know, I still like do a lot of figurative stuff. I like to tell,
Yes.
I like to tell stories in my images. This is the family on because another thing for me was, I think it's important to tell your story, because it's what I can relate to. Like, I can't paint horses because I've never been around horses. I can't paint what I don't understand. This was something I grew up, you know, seeing as a child. Like, when it was hot, nobody had air conditioners. You open up the window and everybody slept on the fire escape, or you spent all day till you had to go inside and go to sleep. So this is something I can relate to. So you see two families on the fire escape. It's because it's something that's real and relatable to me. So this is part of a show I did called My Old New York. And it was a good show, but a lot of the images was basically my story and story that people can relate to. It's a grandmother taking her grandson to go grocery shopping. So she got the little carrito, and then so it's kind of narrative, but it's also something that was common and a visual that people can relate to, because again, it's a New York feel, New York scene. You know.
Well, you're immortalizing, your neighborhood. You're immortalizing, the stories that you know or that you've seen, and it's incredibly powerful for you to be able to do that for your community. You've taken on that work, which is a sort of a beautiful thing to capture.
No,
And it's not photography; it's through your eyes, it's through your hand.
yeah. I mean, it's a story that's there. And you don't know how many times we go places, whether you're in California or we're somewhere, and you always run into somebody who goes, "Yeah, I'm from the Bronx," and it's like everybody misses. Or I'm from Queens. I'm from Brooklyn. Everybody misses a piece of home, and New York City is something that kind of molds a lot of people, and like just having these visuals out there and having that narrative, it for me, it's something that I don't know what else to do. Like, what I'm gonna do? I'm not gonna paint cars and stuff like that. This is what I know how to do. I know how to tell my story. So,
and I see that in a lot of your paintings, you also have your signature, your tag is
in
in the painting, like
this is from a
as a
series.
background, as an element.
Yeah, because one of the things I like to do is, so that's all acrylic with brush, right? The background's all spray paint, because though I'm trying to do different things and learn different materials, I always want to keep true to who I really am, which is a graffiti artist. So if you look at everything I've ever painted, the backgrounds are usually all spray paint, or there's elements of spray paint within it, because if there's no spray paint, then it's not me. It's just, it makes more sense for me to have, whether it be tags, whether it's splashes, blends, a piece, or something but it was done with spray paint, then it's, it makes more sense. Like that one was part of a show that I did called Naughty But Nicer. And it was all these pinups. Like I was looking at this book about Vargas. He was an old pinup artist. And
Yeah.
and I said, oh, it was because he was such a renegade at the time, because he was known to do a lot of paintings for like advertisements. And he had always like a raunchy look to it, but there was never any real nudity. It was just raunchy a little. So I saw this book and I was like, wouldn't this be dope to mix the old school stuff with modern day graffiti and mesh it somehow? So I was like, oh, I'm gonna do graffiti in the background. And then I started to do a lot of these.
I love it. I love it. And so as you've transitioned a bit, or not even transitioned, as you're dabbling in all these worlds, you're dabbling in the commercial art world,
Right.
with murals, corporate art, and advertising. You are still part of your community, painting murals for free in your neighborhood, sort of giving back and doing these wonderful walls, and now also doing studio work. Is painting in the studio and exhibiting in galleries something that's been an easy transition for you, or is that yet another new obstacle that you guys are tackling?
Well, I think for us, if we're going to continue dabbling in canvases and in the gallery world, because it's new to us. And it's like, if you got a new pair of sneakers, you're going to keep wearing them till they get worn, right? So for me, that was in Poland. They gave us a trainer paint on. So for me, it's like, I'm going to still be able to do both, because my income is mostly from the commercial work, like the business work that we do, but it is it makes you feel well. Like it makes you feel good when you're in your studio locked away, which my wife will tell you I've been there days at a time sometimes. But so when you're painting and nobody sees what you're doing because you're not posting it nowhere, you're not doing so. But when someone does get to see the fruit of your labor, and you kind of get taken back, like to see their reaction on it, it's a different feeling because when you're painting in the street, they're reacting as you're applying paint. But when you're tucked away somewhere, you know, for us, it's been a little strange, but you know, we're adapting to it because you know we're doing it. But it was weird. This is part of
Right. You're not getting.
this is part of a
Go ahead.
hip
I'm sorry.
in Poland.
This is.
Yes, yes.
So here I'm guessing you get the instant gratification of fans that see it and talk to you like you're explaining.
Right, because you're there, so you're doing it right in front of their eyes. It's kind of like, you know, I've always told some of these like ad agencies, like what they're actually paying for isn't just paint being applied to something. It's an actual performance. It's kind of like a street performer where a van pulls up, 3 guys get out with ladders, and in front of their eyes on a wall that was playing, something gets created and something gets left behind. So they're getting to enjoy it as it's going on, you know? So when you're painting in a studio, people aren't seeing it till you bring it out. And then it's, you know, the reactions are different. You know, you get a lot of people that like it, but it's just, you're so used to the other instant gratification because it's going on right in front.
It's also so much larger outdoors than in the studio.
Yeah.
Larger than life.
Yeah.
And so we have just a few minutes left in this talk. I wanted to open up to questions from the audience, and there's a few questions coming in.
Oh, Bernice was good.
One of the questions is any chance that you'll be doing any virtual art classes for students during the pandemic?
I was asked, but I still have to think that one through, like how to do it and what's going to be my outcome, and you know. But yeah, I mean,
sure.
It's something to give it a thought.
Another one asks, when will you'll be coming out with a new documentary on TATS crew?
Oh, we're actually working on a book. The book is a little complicated because it's not only me buying BJ's story, but it's our whole crew story at the beginning. But you have now 4 decades of a story. So we're not trying to create a book like this. So, you know, we're still trying to chop away at it. We're working with a great writer. He actually, he's a teacher, but he's an art teacher, but he's a professor actually. But we've been working on this book for a while. His name is Richard Leslie, but he does a lot of like catalogs for museums and stuff like that. So, you know, even working with him, it was still at the beginning a little struggle because we want the average person to read through the book fine. We don't want it to be read like if it's, you know, part of a college curriculum that people don't understand. So, but he has it. He got it.
Sure. Well, we're very excited to see that. And then the last question, or there's probably more coming, is there any advice that you could give to young artists or young writers that are coming up now and that also want to travel or follow in your footsteps?
Just don't give up. Believe in what you're doing. You know what I mean? And don't be afraid to try something. Don't be afraid. I mean, we've done walls that we've walked away from. Or me personally, I'm like, oh, that was ugly. But everybody's like, I loved it. I'm like, oh man, that was ugly. But at least I tried it. So, I mean, like anything else, you're only gonna get out of it what you put into. The same way you're only gonna get what you. So you're staying quiet and nobody knows, and you're not trying, then you're not gonna go nowhere.
Well, Nicer, we just spent an hour talking about your career. Thank you for sharing the beautiful work that you've been doing. You know, I feel like we talked for 5 minutes and it's been an hour, and we saw such a small slice of your illustrious career. You know, I highly recommend everybody who's on here to follow Nicer, to follow TATS CRU, and just to see the amazing things that they're creating around the world. And they're a big inspiration to us here at the Museum of Graffiti, and to all the writers that I know that have looked up to you guys for a very long time. We're humbled to have you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for having me. Definitely.
All right. Well, have a good night. Stay safe. And until next time, brother. Thank you.
All right, dogs. Peace.